Benedict Cumberbatch's American accent is actually probably the most magic you'll get out of this movie.
Through the mystic arts, we harness energy and shape reality. We travel great distances in an instant.
How do I get from here to there?
How did you become a doctor?
Study and practice, years of it.
Looking for you.
So hey guys, welcome to Owen Sound. Today I'm going to be talking about Doctor Strange. This is a new Marvel film directed by Scott Derrickson, who you may remember from Sinister and Deliver Us from Evil, both horror movies, so it's interesting that he was chosen for this, although he was also the director of the remake of The Day the Earth Stood Still. Of course, the movie stars Benedict Cumberbatch as the titular Dr. Stephen Strange, Tilda Swinton as Chameleon as Ever as the Ancient One, Rachel McAdams as the nurse Christine Palmer, Benedict Wong as Wong, Chiwetel Ejiofor as Baron Mordo, and Mads Mikkelsen unsurprisingly playing the villain as the character Caecilius. Overall, on the cast, Benedict Cumberbatch and Tilda Swinton are the most fun, generally, given that they both kind of flip their characters' expectations a lot. Benedict Cumberbatch is kind of one of the more refreshingly, I feel like not just constantly giving quips, Marvel characters. I felt like there was a lot more like heart to his character than we'd had in some of the characters in the universe recently, so I found that really refreshing. Going to Tilda Swinton's character, I found generally she was fun to watch, as you would expect, just kind of this guru who's very unfamiliar with the world, but the way that they painted her character, she was very familiar with the outside world and wasn't totally lost, and a lot of her humor actually came out of this, and she was a very interesting character that I felt like we didn't get enough of, but she was still really interesting. Ejiofor and Wong are both really fun characters overall, especially Wong's character has like a building joke to him, just in terms of the humor that he brings, although he's really not in enough of the movie. The movie has a weird part where pretty much none of the side characters get a lot of screen time. Ejiofor gets a little more screen time as Baron Mordo, but generally, just as the sidekick, he also just doesn't show up in enough of the scenes for you to really feel the camaraderie that he's supposed to have with Strange, as it's how it feels like it's supposed to be played off. And lastly, Mads Mikkelsen actually plays, as usual, a really great villain. Generally, you actually really start to side with what he's trying to do near the end of the movie. You never totally take a side, although I do feel this is somewhat in part to the way that the characters are used in the movie, and he just doesn't get enough screen time with his ideology. Now, this movie is really just a visual spectacle to watch. It's just eye candy from top to bottom. Now, I will say this is mostly any of the magical battle sequences or scenes where people are particularly using magic, but overall, this was really coming off as I guess the best way to describe it was a M.C. Escher painting turned through a kaleidoscope. There's also some Inception-esque world bending that you may have seen in the trailers, but at some points I also found that it was unclear whether or not the world bending or just kind of shifting the background while they were doing magic was actually doing anything, as a lot of the time the world bending was used as a combat trick, and in some scenes they would just do it while committing some ritual, and it didn't seem to make any sense as to why the world would also bend at this time. But overall, I still found the movie super fun to watch in any of these sequences. So narratively, I found the movie a little dry. It's a Marvel movie at this point. A lot of their origin stories are just going to start to feel a little dry in this respect. It was kind of interesting to see the introduction of, I guess, the non-Thor-esque magic and the idea of different dimensions in a non-Thor idea, because it seemed to be like disconnected from that quite a bit. So that was really cool. So you had a lot of lore to dig into, which I thought was an interesting part of it, as I do actually tend to nerd out on trying to dig into the lore, as I've been more DC than Marvel my whole life, so I'm trying to get back into that. So I did find that side a little interesting. Also, sometimes it just felt like they narratively hit the fast forward button with Strange's training, and early on with his incident, you just have like a brief introduction to his character, and then he's you know, driving down a road and you're like, oh, wow, we're doing this already. So other than that, there's really not that much to say. I've been finding the Marvel movies a little bit bland recently. It's just something about the narrative style is starting to just run dry. Of course, you had something like Civil War, which is more of a fan service and like get every character into the movie kind of money machine. Not that it wasn't fun to watch. I just have started to find their movies a little bit dry. And regardless, all of these movies are just at the end of the day, at the very least, fun. So going to this movie, movie. Despite its narrative weaknesses, I did find the visuals just to be really stimulating from top to bottom. I would love to see the visual artists from this movie work on anything. It was really funny. At the end, I was wondering how long is the list of visual artists gonna be, and it took up the entire screen at one point, and I think it was comparable to something like closer to Civil War in terms of how many visual artists worked in this movie. And it's interesting given that this movie had such a visual spectacle, where Civil War was more like they were using special effects to make the superpowers happen. Quick spoiler note, I thought the ending was a little anticlimactic, although I did actually like it more than I've liked a lot of Marvel endings recently. Despite the anticlimactic part, it was actually a fun, kind of more cartoony way, which I think works in the Marvel movies now, because I feel like that's how they should be. And just, it made the villain seem kind of weak, but at the same time, I just thought it was a much funner way to end the movie, although they didn't really build it up at all or give any sort of indications to it earlier on in the movie, so it felt weird in that respect. Also, quick side note before the rating, but Marvel's new 20-second plus long intro with their studio name at the start of the movie really just broke for me. Probably what was one of the few remaining studios that had about a 3-second like titler right before the movie. Like, it would just say Marvel and immediately the music for the movie would kick in, but now we have this long like almost minute long sequence of showing all the heroes that we all know at this point, and then it says Marvel Studios, and you're like, I know, I'm watching your like 25th movie. You know, we don't need this super long title. So overall, I really found Doctor Strange to be one of the most fun and consistently paced Marvel movies in recent years. Even as much as I loved Ant-Man, it was more funny than I guess consistently paced and fun. And as I was mentioning before, Civil War to me felt fun, but just too much of a let's try to get everything crammed in here type of movie. So this one actually really stood out to me in that respect and really felt like they were introducing a new side of the Marvel world. There's fun performances and some great visuals, and really despite the narrative problems, I really want to give this one a 7.0. I worry that it might go down on a future watch, but overall I really love this one, and I really think that it's one that will bring a lot to the Marvel universe going forward, especially where he can interact with the other characters in the MCU and Avengers as a whole. And I really hope that this means they're going to add more style and pizzazz to their films. I really felt like the visual style of this was enough to sell me the movie, so I really hope they start adding different things like this to their movies going forward. As always, you can check out my work out at my Owen Sound blog, and you can check out the movie podcast I do with my friend Michael. That's The Real Deal Podcast. I'll link that at the bottom for you guys. We won't be doing any new podcasts till after we see Rogue One. That's going to be just a huge Rogue One, everything I've been talking about on here, and a year roundup, so check that out there. And one last thing before I go, I know we're about 20 plus Marvel movies in. I didn't even want to get an exact number because at this point it doesn't really matter how many there are, but what is your, and you can include actually the out of universe, but it would probably be easier to just do the MCU. What is your favorite Marvel movie?